and welcome to Graywood Gardening. Well, it is the end of June here in Zone 4, Minnesota, and after about a week of building, I finally got all of the raised beds built in the veggie garden area about a month later than I was hoping to. So on this video, we are finally going to get all of those veggies that I started in the spring and late summer into the ground. But not all of them are actually going to go into raised beds. Now, the watermelons, cantaloupe, and pumpkins are just much too large to grow in a raised bed at any kind of scale. And to be fair, we've never grown these before. This is our first year. So what I think I'm going to do is plant them in an area of the veggie garden that's not going to be used this year. Since we have pure sand here, however, what I'm going to try doing is digging a big deep hole in the sand, filling it in with garden soil and a little bit of organic fertilizer, and then plant the plants in there and make these holes 4 or 5 feet apart so that they can vine all over this area of the garden. I don't know if this is going to work, if that's going to end up being enough nutrients for these plants, but here's hoping. Alright, so that I think is about the size of the hole I'm going to dig. It's, maybe 2.5 feet deep. And that far down, even the sand is all still moist. So hopefully this will be enough to keep the plants alive and let them thrive. Now I just have 13 more to dig. The general advice for pumpkins and melons is that you really should seed them directly in the ground and not start them in pots. This wasn't an option for us this year, but they're supposed to be very sensitive to either their stems breaking and root disturbance. So the goal here is to plant it disturbing the roots as little as possible. Hopefully that should be pretty good. This section of the veggie garden, we're hoping will one day have a small greenhouse here. This is right up against the north slope. That's probably not going to happen for years, if ever, so for now it seems like a great place to plant all of the melons and squashes. So all told here, we have planted 3 watermelons, 2 cantaloupes, 2 butternut squash, and 7 pumpkins of various varieties. I'm planting basil here, and I'm planting the basil about 1 foot apart, so about one basil every 1 square foot in the garden. This is obviously very large basil, should have been planted out probably 3-4 weeks ago. Now we actually planted up all of the rest of the raised beds without the camera running, most of it over Father's Day weekend, so this is just about the last of the plants that need to get planted, and then I'm actually going to toss some seeds directly in the raised beds. Now, you can see I actually pinched this basil out once while it was growing, causing it to branch. And every time you pinch out the top, it'll branch at the point that you pinched. And so you want to pinch it out probably a little bit more often than I have, so that you get this big bushy plant with lots and lots and lots of basil leaves. One of the things that you have to watch out for basil is basil will bolt. It'll begin to flower at the top, and you don't want to let it flower because then the plant is pretty much done growing. So what I usually do is I'll grow a decent sized bed of basil, and every time it starts, I'll pinch it out when it's small, but then as it gets big, anytime it's starting to flower, you can see like the little leaves that come up before it starts to flower. Every time it's about to flower, I'll come pinch the tops off of all of the leaves, and so I'll pinch off like that much. And then once I have a decent number of plants that have split a decent number of times, I pinch all those tops off, and then I'll make a few batches of basil. I'll pinch all the tops off, and then I'll make a few batches of pesto out of it. And then, of course, it'll branch again, and then it'll start to flower again, and then when I pinch it off, I'll have twice as many leaves. So I'll make twice as many batches of pesto. And so usually by the end of summer, I'm making huge batches of pesto to shove in the freezer, which hopefully will last me the entire year. Okay, so that looks like a total of 22 basil plants, which, assuming nothing attacks them and eats them, oh, this one was never pinched out. Assuming nothing attacks them and eats them, this should be, by the end of the year, a huge amount of basil, everything you need for fresh cooking, and then hopefully enough to make pesto to last until next year. It smells great. I'm going to be planting sweet corn in this half of the bed. This way is south, so the corn will not be shading out the basil. Now, it's getting on toward the end of June, so this is really, really late to be planting corn, and we'll probably be getting a crop, if everything works out, in sometime in September, maybe even mid-September, but better late than never. We didn't have garden beds to plant in until now. We have always been very successful at growing sweet corn, but we've also always had it all eaten by squirrels before we get a chance to harvest it. So it'll be very interesting to see how it works out at our new property here at Graywood. We actually don't have a whole ton of squirrels despite being in the forest, and I think it's because we have a lot of predators here. So here's hoping we get good corn and we get a chance to eat some of it. I'm using square foot spacing for the sweet corn here, which means I should be planting about 4 plants per square foot. Now I'm actually just doing 4 kernels of corn, 4 seeds per square foot, so I don't expect to have 100% germination, so there'll be some holes here, but it won't be a problem. It is important when you're growing corn that you plant it pretty close together and in large groups. Corn is pollinated by the wind, and it's only going to reliably get really good pollination if you have a nice clump very close together. That said, it's also important that you only plant one variety of corn. If you have very different varieties of corn that are growing at the same time, that are getting pollinated at the same time, they will cross-pollinate each other, and you'll have a hybrid between the two, which maybe if you're doing different varieties of sweet corn could be okay, but one thing that I hope to do next year is grow popcorn. And you definitely don't want your popcorn getting crossed with your sweet corn. The way that I think I'm going to avoid that next year is by staggering the plantings. So they will be planted near each other, but they will not be pollinated at the same time. Alright, in the final bed that's currently built, I'm going to be planting a bunch of seeds. I'm going to be trying out 4 different kinds of carrots, and then we'll be planting a bunch of lettuce using a mix of Salanova lettuce, romaine lettuces, and butterhead lettuce. Normally, I would prefer to start lettuces inside. You just get much better germination and you avoid a lot of pest issues by planting them out when they're 3 to 4 weeks old and they're big enough to survive, like a caterpillar munching on them. But we didn't have room to start stuff inside this year, so it's all going out straight into the garden. We'll see how that works. The other beds that we planted up, we actually have one entire bed filled with bell peppers, and that is 40 bell peppers in that bed. The next bed has a couple of extra bell peppers that didn't fit in the first, plus 6 jalapeno and 6 cayenne peppers, as well as a few tomato plants. The next bed has just 2 zucchini and 2 yellow squash. The next bed up has 6 tomato plants in it, and these are actually a mix of determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. For the tomatoes, we are trying 2 varieties of cherry tomato. One is Sun Gold, that I've grown before and love. The other one I forget the name of. For the determinate tomatoes, we are growing a few Roma tomatoes, which we love. I like them sliced, but they're great for making into sauces and canning. And we also are trying a new variety called Oregon Spring, which looks like a medium-sized tomato that looks like it'll be a really good slicing tomato, which could also be good for making salsas and stuff. So, once I get this bed seeded, I am then ready to turn on the sprinkler and be done for now. Or at least be ready to start building more beds. Need more beds before the summer's out.
Hi.
Hi! What you doing?
Hi, Bob.
You have a bubbles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is,
Is this the bubbles?
yeah.
I'm gonna open it for you.
Yeah.
Wow, that works pretty good. Do you want to try?
No.
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 Yeah? Yeah, that's the dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dada's gonna plant some plants. I'm gonna use the stick to help me mark the rows. I'll have a row right here-ish. Row right here-ish. Can I have that one?
Bye.
What if I trade you? What if I trade you this one for that one? Oh.
Bye.
Hi. Thank you for visiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a butterhead lettuce. Oh, you want me to take this one? Now let's see what we have here for sunflower. We have branching sunflower. Are you getting the seeds out? Yeah. All right. right, and that is everything planted out. It's actually been a week since we planted everything, and as you can see, the corn has already come up and is growing strong. It is also getting incredibly hot out. The forecast says hot and humid for as far as the eye can see as we enter the horrible middle of the Minnesota summer. There's a lot more work to be done here in the veggie garden area, and I think a lot of that work is going to get put off to the fall, or at least until later summer when it's a little cooler. That's all I have for you on this video. Next time, we're going to try to find some stuff to do that doesn't involve working outside in the heat and humidity. So until then, happy gardening.